my mind, this is where the advantage comes with being ADHD. That's my creative brain at work. Now, if you know anything about people who are neurodivergent in general, we tend to be very good problem solvers. I never worked with the neurodiverse community until after my own diagnosis. And then I made it like, these are the only people I want to work with.
Now that I kind of take a step back, having this conversation, I can see how many different things I'm doing that revolve specifically around the foundation of business in general.
How does that feel? Doesn't it feel good to have that?
It does.
It's like building a house. You got to have the foundation. Right?
I know. I'm getting goosebumps. Shell, I have been extremely excited to have this conversation with you and on a topic that I know very little about, and I'd venture to guess, I try not to assume, but I'd venture to guess, is often misunderstood. And so to be able to have this conversation with somebody who is an expert in this field and has made this a part of her work and her life, I think that we're going to be able to get a ton of value, not only for myself, but for our listeners here today too. So I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Joss, for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've generated enough curiosity for people to know what the heck it is I'm talking about, can you kind of just give me a background on what your expertise is in and how that can relate to business owners?
Absolutely. Well, my title is ADHD Career Coach. And what that means is that I'm an expert in all things career, have been for 35 years. That's what my master's degree is in. It's what my experience has been in. But the ADHD part came about 15 years ago after my own diagnosis. And while I was always helping people with their career direction, which is my big forte, basically, is the direction piece of it, I wasn't really working specifically with our community because I was diagnosed late in life, right? So my background is all things career and currently all things working with the neurodivergent community.
Can you explain neurodivergent for my audience that might not know what that is?
Well, ADHD is it's the way our brains are wired. And I always say, if you want somebody to actually go into the whole neurological aspect of it, the scientific aspect of it, that's not me. I'm not an expert in that. I'm an expert in career, but I always can talk about my own experience with the diagnosis. And if you'd like, I can kind of share with you what my experience has been.
I'd love that.
Yeah. So when I was in my 20s, I wasn't diagnosed till my 50s. Okay.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So I'm very much of a late bloomer, very much. In my 20s, I always was directed towards getting an education, but the education never got me where I wanted. So I ended up in jobs I hated. Really got fired from over and over and over again. And now today, I recognize that it wasn't because of my abilities or skills. It was because of my attitude and that I basically hated the work that I was doing.
What were the reasons, if you don't mind me asking, what were the reasons that you were getting fired? What was your employer saying to you, during this time?
Well, I think I just wasn't really focused on doing the actual work. It was mostly legal secretarial. I hated being a secretary. I hated doing clerical. I had the great skills. I could type a mile a minute. And back in the day, I was doing shorthand. So I had really, really good skills. And I had enough knowledge of legal, administration, basically, to pass. And always, one thing a lot of people say about individuals with ADHD is that we can ace an interview like that, whether it's something we love or something we don't love. So that means we get into a lot of situations that are not the right situation for us. And if we don't know what that situation is meant to be, it ends up disastrous, just like it did for me over and over again. So I would make silly mistakes. I could made copies all wrong. I couldn't follow it's not that I couldn't follow directions. I kind of refused. I got frustrated with the directions, especially if they seemed too technical for me or I just wasn't interested. And generally, it always came down to my interest level and engagement level in what I was doing. That's always what it came down to. And then when I knew I had to go back and get a degree to do the kind of work I wanted to do, which was helping people on some level. I knew I wanted to do something that wasn't therapy, being a therapist, because I understood about myself and I was pretty self-aware even back then. I realized not everybody was in their 20s, but even back in my 20s, I understood that I did not want to be sitting on a chair listening to somebody for months on end without a resolution or without some action that I could advise that they take, very specific action to get certain things done so that there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that was why I never went into marriage and family counseling or anything that kind of leads one into the therapy realm. And then I found vocational rehabilitation, which was just exactly what I wanted because it was all of the counseling aspect of it. It was actually helping people who are disabled. And at the time, I was working mainly with physical disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I helped find and define what would be the best fit for them within their disabilities. Not as much focus on their interests as I am now in the work I do, but back then that was definitely a consideration. So the work I did was very much beginning, middle, and end, the evaluation, the assessment, then it was going into putting together a plan for them, then it was going into deciding if they needed some kind of training or if we could just place them directly. And then it was just placement after that. So that was the end, that once they got placed, that was it. Unfortunately for me at the time, or fortunately, I should say, because it led to what I'm doing now, I was working in a system where it was mandatory to offer in the workers' compensation system, if somebody was injured on the job, they had to be offered vocational rehabilitation if they could not return to their former employer or actually to their former work. And so, uh, unfortunately, what happened was because somebody decided we were all making too much money as vocational rehabilitation counselors, and it was draining the insurance companies, you know, resources, according to them. The whole thing, the mandatory thing was aced. And even back then, I knew that was coming. I
Mm-hmm.
could see that, down the road, I was going to have to find a way to make a transition into doing something else. And I knew that I loved working in the career realm, helping people make decisions about their careers. And then I got trained, finally went into training with Richard Bowles, who wrote What Color is Your Parachute? Way back in the day, many days, probably before, maybe while you were in high school or even before then. Um, and I got that training and I did that. I became a parachute professional and did that process with my clients for many years until the next step for me was starting my own company. Uh, and you're going to ask me this question, I know. I'm anticipating it. What are some of the advantages of having our brain wiring? I'm asking it for you. Uh, One of the advantages is that we get these ideas,
You
these
know what?
creative ideas.
Before we get into
Yeah.
that, I can you explain to me like I was a child what ADHD actually is before we get into how it can be advantageous. I mean I'm listening to your story and I'm piecing together some of the things, but I want to have a full understanding.
Yeah. So if anyone really wants to sort of if they suspect, they might have ADHD. There's so many checklists that you can find online, and you can start there. If it's like 80% of the things checked off on that list, you probably should go get the diagnosis. Okay. So for me, and like I said, I generally talk about what I experienced with ADHD. Number one, feeling distracted and disengaged from the work I was doing when I wasn't interested in that work. So if we're not interested in something and we aren't engaged in it, and we find it difficult to focus on it, to focus even any kind of activity, interest, anything, right? So we do the sifting and sorting process often where we say, no, yep, nope. That's what I do now. I make decisions about what I'm not going to do and what I will do, because I realize that if I try and pursue something, and just like all people, most people with ADHD pre-diagnosis, we beat ourselves up because we don't get stuff done, that, or we disregard things. We think there's something wrong with us because we can't stay on task. We do get distracted easily. And again, that distraction usually comes from disengagement or not being able to enjoy what you're doing. There's got to be an element of enjoyment, excitement, energy behind that. Really a reason. We almost have to give ourselves a reason for doing almost any kind of task. Got to get this done because, and I do want to say each person is completely individual. Some people have more of one aspect of ADHD than others do. I'm what you call inattentive. And what that means is I am hyperactive in my brain, as both inattentive and hyperactive would be. But the hyperactive would take the form more of the physical, like especially with kids. That's where you see the kids jumping around. They can't.
Sure.
That's the hyperactivity. For me as a child, I was inattentive, which means my brain would go into hyperactivity, but I wouldn't say anything. I would just doodle.
Mm-hmm.
I would space out. I wouldn't pay attention, but I was quiet. So very often, especially I think it's true for a lot of young women, young girls, we tend to get kind of we not noticed, not understood, and left behind because of that. Like, well, she didn't say anything. She doesn't make trouble.
So when you say
Okay.
Hyperactive in your mind, are you saying just thought after thought after thought? And there's just like
bombardment.
oh, okay.
Thought bombardment. And I remember for so many years, because again, like I said, I was diagnosed very late in life, and I never understood why it felt like I was standing in the middle of Times Square with people rushing by me all the time and I couldn't move. Those were my thoughts. That was the image that I always saw myself, my brain being, was that there were all these thoughts that I could not stop, which kept me up at night, still does, I don't take medication because I'm older and the stimulants impact me. Coffee is kind of my go-to. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but for me, it kind of works. So yeah, for the inattentive, it's mostly the thought hyperactivity.
Okay. And then you had mentioned disengagement, not being interested in basically the task at hand. Is there a version of this that is you get really focused on something and you do like something and then tomorrow you don't?
Yes. I call those shiny objects.
Yeah. See, this is kind of the picture that I have in my head of when somebody says ADHD, like you do like something, you are engaged in something, but only for a limited amount of time.
Yeah. And so the sustainability part is a deeper dive process, which I'll talk to you about later. But that is
Okay.
what I realized was so important, was that we do tend to get interested in a lot of things. In fact, if you go to my website, the first thing you notice is too many ideas. We've got ideas coming out of our ears, right? about everything. What can we, I just, and then I always ask this question, well, when was the last time you picked one and focused just on that one idea to see if it was something you wanted to pursue? And almost everyone says, most people don't even Google that. I don't want to do anything. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of the characteristics of ADHD, and uh, something that a lot of us
Okay. Okay.
have is that we have all these ideas and we don't know what to do with them. For me, it was always about the ones that I pursued were the ones that kept coming up over and over and over again. Like there was a lot of repetition of the same idea. And then it was like, oh, I guess I better do something about it. And generally the thought was, no one else is doing this. I guess I better be the one to do it. So that was, and then once I got started on it, if I was engaged in it, I would keep going. But I tend to call that sometimes a mission versus like an actual thing that you want to do. It's like Mission Impossible, where they say, uh, if you choose to accept this mission, the tape will destroy in 10 seconds and you're off and running, but it's got a beginning, a middle, and end, right? So that's what a lot of the missions that we sometimes engage in are meant to be. We don't often see it that way,
Hmm.
but that's the way I frame it to make it more acceptable for people to understand that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine to have a mission. Just understand that's what it is. It's not necessarily the thing you're going to do for your whole life.
Okay.
It's, yeah. So that is, I did a lot of those kinds of things without being able to label it. It wasn't until I started my franchise system, before I got my diagnosis, many years before I got my diagnosis, that it was called Kids Art. It was an art franchise, still going. One of the original franchisees took it over, but I had the bright idea to do it, and after several years, I stuck with it. It was one of those missions, but it lasted too many years. And then before my diagnosis, I didn't realize that every day I'm hating it.
Hmm.
At the time when everything kind of the dust settled and it just became the day to day, I realized I hated it. I didn't like being in my own company. I didn't like the work I was doing anymore. So I wasn't engaged. I disengaged from that and eventually went back to doing this work. And here I am.
That's interesting. So that's a perfect shift into, kind of what you started to bring up before. In what circumstances can this be advantageous? How can we use this?
We can use it in a way when we understand what it is that we truly enjoy doing and what the things are. Like if you ask anybody out there, anybody neurotypical, neurodiverse, whatever, um, what is it that you want? And since I talk about career, I'm talking about career.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm not talking about other, where you want to live or
Sure.
anything like that. When we are understanding of what it is that we actually want, and we can articulate those things, and that's the big key. Can you articulate it? Can you talk about it? Can you be clear about it? Can you describe it? What it is that you want in your work or career? Since career is my bag, that's the thing I do. Um, then that can be considered extremely advantageous to everyone, not just for you personally, but to everyone, because people can understand you clearly. They get it. They see it, and very few people are able to do that. So I think I started out saying, if you were to ask everyone what it is that they really want in their career, very few people can answer that question. Very few. That's the work I do to help people answer that question and to get very clear about it.
Awesome. Let's get into that because I'm super curious now that I have a better understanding of it's almost of the effect of ADHD on somebody in their careers. How do you help them answer that question? Because I imagine this must be difficult, especially if they had been previously undiagnosed. They weren't sure why it's so difficult for them. So how do you help them?
One of the things I do, I make very clear, is that we have a small community you work with, so you have other people, like of 4 to 6 people. They become your network, your support, your uh, the people that will give you feedback, the people that you can work through problems with. And those become very essential besides me, because I feel like it is a community kind of thing. You need more than one person just to help you kind of see things from different perspectives. The thing that is the most important thing I do is provide a structure for people to answer certain questions and to really start to see what I call the clues that make up your ideal uh, work, or the kind of work that direction you should be going in. And so you become like a detective. Now, if you know anything about people who are neurodivergent in general, we tend to be very good problem solvers. We love we love to use our brains creatively. We like to think, like they say, outside the box, or however you want to put it. We like to, and that could be in terms of strategizing, uh, being collaborating in some way. We're great on teams as long as we're in the right role. So finding the role that's where we're going to be allowed to be who we are and to use those skills and under the conditions that will support us. Those are all really important things that we address in this within the structure I call the Your Next Career Move Masterclass. And I also wrote a book to go along with it. So we have a resource book that's actually a fillable book, and I'll tell you about that later. But but it goes along with it. It pairs with whatever they're doing. So they're using that, and I'm elaborating, and they're getting support. They're getting coaching along the way. So addressing being able to address all the resistance that will come up a lot around that, because, and I'll say this universally, most people are not taught how to make best career decisions. Whether it's professional, whether it's in the skilled work, doing skilled labor, any of it, people are not given the right instructions on how to do that. There's no roadmap. So I created that roadmap based on originally from Parachute, taken to the next level, where it's now become much more visceral and engaging, which is what our brains need. Our brains need for it to be fun. Like the book that I use is very, what I call ADHD friendly, neurodivergent friendly. It's spiral bound, it lays flat. You want to see it?
Yeah, that'd be
Can I
great.
show it to you?
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, so this is an example of a page. It's spiral bound. It's called Unlock Your Career Path. And you see that that's not part of the book. That's being ADHD and having coffee sitting on top of my book. I'd like to point that out. That's a very important thing to point out. Unlock Your Career Path, a course for neurodivergent adults and teens. And I give my mentor, Richard N. Bowles, the cred here for inspiring me. And I give his wife, who is the head of his foundation, cred as well for encouraging me to create this. Yeah, so there's a lot more. We go through an entire process where little by little they start to uncover who they really are. And they're given permission to just explore without criticism, without judgment. And when what we call safekeeping self, which is the part that resists some of the things that say, you'll never make any money in that. Who are you to do that? You don't know anything about that, but yet you have some interest in it, some attraction for doing certain kinds of things that you never were able to really acknowledge before.
So I want to stop you for a second. I got a question.
Sure.
About this. So is this a common characteristic in neurodivergent people, where they have this push and pull, this tennis match of, this is where I want to go, but there's a million reasons why they shouldn't, are getting in the way? Okay.
And where do
Okay.
you think those come from?
I don't know.
Not their friends, their family, their partners, their cohorts, business people, everybody else, but them. Usually the voices are from other people and their opinions and being afraid of disappointing somebody.
Oh, okay.
That what if I go for something that's gonna, it's not gonna completely support our family. And if that's not even necessarily true, it's just like a thought that comes in.
Sure.
So it stops them from even exploring things that they've been attracted to doing maybe for years and we're scared to death to explore. So this is like an this is like the stage in which they are allowed to completely go crazy about this stuff and without any uh, judgment whatsoever and encouraged to learn more and taught how to learn more. So that is part of the process. And the reminder there that as they go through it organically, they start to see what I call the cream rising to the top, like the areas that make the most sense for them to do. And this is something maybe some of your viewers can relate to. I had a young man who he had a bachelor's degree. He was like 23 or 24, and he was in sales. Like but he hated. He did not like being in sales. But he had to have the degree, I think, to do this kind of whatever kind of sales he was doing. He hated it. He didn't like it. What he really wanted to do was something in the trades, believe it or not. And it was difficult for him because his all his brothers and sisters were doctors, lawyers, you know, well beyond just a bachelor degree professionals. And he felt not intimidated. He just felt like he didn't fit in, and he never had a chance to really. There's a hand going up there. What is that? Is that me doing that? That little hand thing?
I don't know.
Anyway, that could be me. Um, yeah, so he ended up going into construction management,
Oh,
and he
okay.
found a really good program for that. And he loved being on the sites. I mean, he just loved getting his hands dirty and doing all that stuff. That was who he was.
Yeah, I personally know quite a few people in the trade that have been diagnosed ADHD, and they find that working with their hands is what basically
Absolutely.
something that helps them focus. So they're incredible technicians, the ones that I know, and they can fix almost anything because that is kind of like that's their meditation. That's what calms their mind because they can immerse themselves in whatever it is that they're working on, and it stimulates their mind and their body is what I'm assuming, you know. So that's interesting.
Absolutely. And yeah, and the same with I get a lot of people who were doing like account marketing management, things like that, who really are artists. They
Hmm.
just want to do things with art and they
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
do sculpting. And when you say their hands, yeah, they want to do things with their hands and they want to have that freedom. They don't necessarily want to have to get dressed up every day, be in like a rigid environment. They don't want to be in like a corporate kind of environment anymore.
Hmm.
It's not serving the purpose of really allowing them to be who they are. And so if you have an individual, for example, who is in the corporate world and always feels like an outsider, even though they've been in it for years, never felt like they really belonged or they could have really honest conversations with people about what they thought would be maybe a good direction that was a little bit more creative. I just had one of the class participants yesterday go through that in his company. He said he was put on a PIP program. Do you know what those are, the
Yeah,
PIPs?
performance improvement plan.
So I'll just come out and say that probably 50% or more of the people that I work with have been put on PIP programs.
Oh, interesting. I'm
Yeah.
I'm really curious, Shell, if you notice any specific trends from a career standpoint that point to what a good career would be for somebody who has ADHD. I hear all the time, entrepreneurship, stuff like that, and how many of these people are undiagnosed. But it makes me truly wonder, if there is a path that's better suited for people that have something like this. So can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say about that, really, if you're ready for it.
Please.
Um, First of all, people who are neurodivergent will never go on a linear path of any kind. It
Okay.
will
Okay.
always be nonlinear. What I mean by nonlinear is it will start. It'll have a foundation. My foundation is education. So even though I'm a coach, everything I do is about providing education on even doing podcast. When I talk on podcasts, it's about educating,
Mm-hmm.
uplifting, inspiring, hopefully providing information that people aren't aware of. That's who I am. So that foundation needs to be there first. And as far as there's no top 10 field or industry or job. It's specifically what that person is attracted to in terms of what they uncover about themselves. So we're as diverse as the next person. I mean, nobody has the same interests or the same inclinations in terms of the kind of work that they do. It's everybody is different. I see what I can tell you is that I frequently see the skills people want to use are some form of creativity. They like breaking things down. They like systematizing. They like problem solving, right? They like troubleshooting.
Okay.
So that's where you get, mechanics and things like that, or people in all kinds of careers that like to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
plus work with your hands, then that would make a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Even entrepreneurship
so
with systems. I mean, I'm equating a lot of this stuff to, some of the things
yeah.
that I get immersed in, right? And it is truly, the reason why I love owning a business is because of all of the things that you mentioned, right? I get to use creativity. I can visualize what it can be in the future. I like to break all of that down when I don't think that it's working. Problem solving
Yeah.
every single day in pursuit of that. I mean, so I'm starting to understand why people say that a lot of entrepreneurs may be undiagnosed or have this, because they fit a lot of those traits, as do, to your point, mechanics and technicians and things like that on a more
Absolutely.
physical level.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, it's very individual to that
Mm-hmm,
person.
mm-hmm.
That's why we go through the process where they're answering questions for themselves and they're prioritizing what I call their must-haves, the things that are at least the top 5 to 10 elements of like what skills they want to use, what kind of people they want to work with and for. And that would include being an entrepreneur if you're or self-employed. Like I'm a self-employed person who's done the same kind of work for years. So
Mm-hmm.
I've also been an entrepreneur where I started a whole company. I've done it all, but I only consider myself entrepreneurial when I do things like write a book or do things that happen that aren't out there, that where I'm kind of making a difference from my perspective.
Sure, sure.
Um, so yeah, and the self-employment thing, I haven't been employed for over 35 years. I just cannot work for anyone. Cannot. And whenever I think, well, things are really getting hard right now. Things are hard for a lot of people like right now,
Yeah, yeah.
especially a lot of business people, coaches, like if they have to pick between food and coaching, guess what they're so it's like, yeah, we're all kind of going through that thing right now of seeing a little bit of a drop in our need to market more or whatever. But the way I see it for me is it's a little scary. It's been a little scary that way, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also, boy, is it a good challenge, and it helps me to grow because I'm coming up with my mind. This is where the advantage comes with being ADHD. My mind allows me to think of so many ways that I can reach out to people that aren't going to cost them an arm and a leg, and I can still get the get them to see things from this perspective that they've never had before, right? And that's where my mind goes. That's my creative brain at work, right? And I'm doing all kinds of stuff now to just kind of starting. I kind of wish I had started last year a little bit earlier, but you got to do it sometimes, and because being ADHD for me means I don't plan that well. I'm not a great planner. Sometimes things are very spur of the moment for me, but I always seem to get it done. I can get it done in my own way, but I hate planning and having things. I like to use my calendar so I know when appointments are. And once in a while, I'll put to-do lists, but I'm terrible at to-do lists. Everybody's different. There's so many tools out there for us, though. They're all there. So when we have that ADHD, there are enough tools out there to be able to determine which ones will work for you. So even as I go through this process with people, there's some things or exercises in the book that don't work for people. And I go, fine, skip it. Instead, do this. There's plenty of other ones that you can try, other ways to get at the information, which ultimately is what is my very first move, the next move I need to make? Is it in this industry or field or topic? And if so, do I need training? More training? Do I need to actually get a degree of some kind? Can I take a few classes? Can I get a certification? And being able to explore those things in the process of going through this so that you have a very good understanding of what the next move is going to be. And with the foundation for me of education, I know that anything I do, no matter what it is, has to be educational, has to have that component of education in it. I did have one person whose foundation was cars. And he could build a car from the ground up, right? And he was he was always in professional jobs, always, had a bachelor's degree and all that. But he really wanted to be like a car entrepreneur. He wanted to write about cars. He wanted to work on customizing cars. He wanted to be involved in car shows and magazines. And, he just had this whole thing about cars. And so his foundation will always be cars for his whole life, right? So you can grow from there. You can really create something from that point. And our brains will allow us to do it because, again, we're not linear. We're very non-linear, which means the next thing could be get the training, write an article, do a blog post. The next thing could be start a podcast, right? That's what you did.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the branches, I call it, of the tree. So I have this image of the tree and the tree branches. The tree trunk is your foundation. For me, my trunk is education, and the branches are I had to get my degree to do what I'm doing now. I had to. I couldn't really. I don't think my credibility would be what it is today if I didn't have that. So I kind of knew it was do or die. I had to do it. I struggled through it. It was really hard for me, but I had that do or die kind of mentality, commitment. And that's one thing people with ADHD, people who are neurodivergent, once we get our minds wrapped around doing something clearly and in focus, nothing can stop us, even if it takes 100 years to do it. Might take us longer, but we'll get it done.
So I'm curious, because you've spoken a lot about this foundation, which actually makes a lot of sense to me, right? You can do a lot of different things around one specific thing that kind of scratches that itch of needing to do, multiple different things. Is there a limit or a suggestion to how specific or generalized this foundation could be? Or is it just purely individualized, and I ask for a specific reason? Because as you're talking about this, I'm thinking in my head, I'm using my own compass of like, what would my foundation be, right? And
the less specific, the better.
Okay.
The less specific, the better. So education for me is coaching, it's everything I do has to have that in mind. Okay. So it can't be limiting. Like if you, it can't be a specific job.
Yeah.
It is a much broad, something much broader. So
Okay.
like when I say cars, he knew that everything he ever was going to do for the rest of his life was going to involve some element of that.
Yeah.
Food is another one, like
Okay.
food.
Food.
People that are foodies and
Food.
everything they want to do, food.
Yeah.
Think about it. Chef, caterer, all the going
Critic.
to a critic, writing doing cookbook
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
authors,
Yeah.
podcaster. I always say that
Yeah.
because that's always a big
Now
what
you can have
podcasters
podcasts
do.
for whatever you want. So
Absolutely anything. It's just that's what's the beauty
yeah.
of podcasting. Yeah.
So this is why it's interesting to me, because if I had to pick a foundation for me, I think it would be business. And that's why I asked about generalization, because I'm a CEO of a company, but I also recently started another company. I'm an investor in several other companies. And it almost seems like whatever I do, including this podcast, is it revolves around business. I'm also a coach. I help business owners grow and scale their business. So I have kind of molded my life, unbeknownst to me until this very moment, around not just blue collar business, not just my HVAC and refrigeration company that I'm the CEO of, but business in general. That's just such a small piece to the pie. But I think, Shell, for probably 15 years, I identified very strongly with that. But now that I kind of take a step back, having this conversation, I can see how many different things I'm doing that revolve specifically around the foundation of business in general.
How does that feel? Doesn't it feel good to have that?
It
It's
does.
like building a house. You got to have the foundation,
I
right?
know. I'm getting goosebumps. Like it's it.
Aw.
No, it's not. It's a great feeling because it feels focused but fulfilling. And so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So anytime I work with somebody, very often they aren't doing anything close to what their real foundation, what they're really meant to be doing. And when we hit on that foundation, it's like this aha moment, this big moment, right? And I live for that. I live for that. I mean, we celebrate, we bring out every, celebration emoji you can imagine. We pop the cork, so to speak. But it's really an important milestone is
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
really understand fully that for the rest of your life or your work life, everything you do is going to be based in some way, in some form. And with our brains, again, we are never going to be straight up the corporate ladder kind of thing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
does not work.
Yeah. Yeah.
What works is knowing and understanding what the next pivot is going to be,
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
that. And it becomes very clear when you start understanding this concept of having the foundation, becomes very clear what the next thing is. You don't have to like struggle with, should I do this or should I do that? It could
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
multiple, maybe doing a couple of things at the same time. That's okay too.
Right. As long as it falls
Um,
into that same bucket, right? Then there's never really a
as
question
long
of
as it falls,
guidance. There's space in there.
as long as it falls into that, and it's built on, let's say, built on that foundation
Yeah.
in construction terms, built on the
Yeah.
foundation.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. You're making me feel like I should probably get tested after this conversation. Um,
Not necessarily. Yeah, I don't know. Everybody has to decide for themselves.
right.
It's
Exactly.
one of those things that people, I do encourage you if you feel, and by the way, what I'm saying is true for everyone.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
not, I never work with the neurodiverse community until after my own diagnosis. And then I made it like, these are the only people I want to work with.
Mm.
And I knew it immediately because whenever I was working with people that I knew had ADHD or had some kind of brain wiring similar to mine, that I enjoyed it.
Mm.
I loved it. The conversations flowed. It was much easier to connect on some level. There was always a lot of humor there. We could laugh
Mm-hmm,
about
mm-hmm.
certain things. It's like, it makes a lot of sense, and in my own life, most of the people, my good friends are neurotypical. So very often I have to explain to them. It's not obvious like it is with, say, even me working with the participants in my class. We can laugh and have a really good time because we really understand each other, right? That's what makes, I pick my audience based on who I enjoy working with, which is how it should be with
Yeah.
everyone,
No,
you know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
So,
so we're gonna move to close here pretty soon, but I want to make sure I ask, Shell, what is the most important question I haven't asked?
ooh, you're making me think here, Josh. You're giving, you're giving me pause. Um, I think we covered a lot. If you'd asked something now, it would take me probably 10 minutes to answer. So I probably should not say. I'm hesitant to say. I just want people to sort of have an understanding. The thing that a lot of people ask that you is, and I kind of made reference to it, is what does the process look like?
Mm-hmm.
Like specifically, what does the process look like? And that is, where we go through all the different elements of what make up the work that you're supposed to be doing so that organically you arrive at your foundation and your very first next move,
Mm,
right?
got it.
Which could again be one of different things. It could be going into a whole new field, entirely using the skills you already have to get started, doing something that you've already done within a different field. It could be getting training, a whole new training to start something different completely. So many different, but it becomes very clear at that point what the next move is. So,
Oh, that's great. So I think that's a great stopping point, Shell. I mean, I could probably go Rogan on this episode and just ask you questions for 3 hours, but in the spirit of my audience and and keeping their time to a
for
minimum.
3 hours.
Yeah. um,
I probably can't listen for 3 hours, but I can go for 3 hours.
oh, you and me both. I'm right there with you. But I really appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people find you if they want more information about what you do or help from you or the book, the resource? How can people find you?
Okay, can I take like a little bit to
Yeah, yeah.
share this? So, career coaching with Shell, SHELL.com is my website, or the same one is passion2tocareer.com. They're both the same. Some people prefer one or the other. And then be sure and click on like the episodes because I have several podcast episodes on the website. That's how people get to know me. And the master class is the thing it's like the first thing that I do with people. Very often, the only thing they need from me is to go through that process. So signing up for an intro call with me via Calendly. There are plenty of places to do that right on the front page there. Um, I love to talk to people, even if they don't participate. I feel like I want to be helpful in some way. And to get the book, now the book is unlockyourcareerpath.com, but it's also on the website that you can click on it. It's simple. It's the download fillable PDF ebook. So the ebook is what I sell on my website. That's what I'm kind of hoping people will start with because you don't have to make the full commitment. If you need the physical book, it's on Amazon, and there's a link that will take you to Amazon. So
Great. Awesome. Shell, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending your time with us today. Thank you very, very much for all your knowledge, wisdom, and insight surrounding this. Definitely new information for me, and I know that my listeners, my guests, or my viewers will find it valuable.
Thanks for listening to the Blue is the New White podcast. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. For more, please follow at Josh Zolin on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Or visit us at blueisthenewwhite.com, where we create success, not debt, and build blue-collar heroes.